Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome for our lovely Tuesday night. And we have got a really incredible, thought provoking guest to hear from this evening. And I'm talking to the amazing Anita Bentata, who is an award winning psychotherapist for the Empower program for women. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's an online facilitator, and she is a woman just absolutely passionate about empowering other women to take charge of their own brains, bodies, and life. Anita, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Annette. It's always awesome to talk with you.
Well, I haven't spoken to you for a while, and I know that what you were doing a few years ago was quite incredible. Can you tell us what it is that you're obsessed with and why you're obsessed with it?
Yeah, look, I've got so many obsessions, but the big one that's been consuming my life for a while is supporting women to live in their power, that we don't realise we've got such an untapped potential on how to move on from the past and how to be in charge, as you said, our own brain and body, and it not be dependent on other people or circumstances or anything. And I came about being really passionate about this through my own story of escaping domestic violence and going through a lot trying to protect my girls and myself. And it was through some really dark places where I felt like I didn't have the support, and things were really beyond words. That's why I guess I'm finding it hard to find the word. So hard to explain, where at points in my life I felt like I was dead, but I was going through the motion of every day. And it was those really dark places that I had to dig deep in myself and find out, how do I feel good about myself and not let what other people are doing control how I feel and what's possible for me in my life. And it was digging deep in those significant points that led me to change careers and become a psychotherapist and discover more and more about how we all have this ability to change the way our life's been. Like, if I look back on what my life used to be like to what it's like now, it's massively different. You know, I don't really like to talk about it because it's just such a contrast to now. It's like two different people, and it's like everybody can do that. It's actually not that difficult, but there's certain things that we need to know and skills. And so I'm really passionate about sharing that with people, with women in my Women Empower program, which excites me. Then every time I hear of another woman that has taken on the skills, and like just after one session, how much better they feel, and the clarity and the energy and the possibilities. It's like change. From working like 25 years in the field, I just found that change happens really, really quickly. It always does in my sessions because I've got some specialist skills. But I realised, like at the end of last year, even, because I'm always learning, I'm always expanding what I bring in and how I understand what's going on, that there's actually some techniques of understanding what's going on that trip people and have the brain loop into thinking that we're still stuck in the past. And so I'm just so excited to add this to my work with women, because then the progress that they're making can accelerate even faster, because they know how to make sure their brain's not taking them down the wrong path.
So when you go through a trauma, whether it's domestic violence or financial losses or disengagement from family, how does that disempower us, and how do we let go of the past? Because that would seem like it's a bit of a monkey on your back that's really hard to let go of.
Yeah, and particularly when it hits on survival instinct things like, which finances does. And what it does is, when trauma is any experience where our system goes into overwhelm, where we don't have the skills or support to respond to it. And so our system goes into involuntary stress responses, coping mechanisms. And what's meant to happen is when we're out of that situation, we're meant to get the support and the skills to be able to integrate what has happened. But our society is so depleted of knowing the right skills that people often keep accumulating. And like the reason human species have flourished so much is because we're so good at adapting. But the thing is, we also adapt to the terrible. And so one of the things that I love teaching women and showing them is how to stop within it. It's a simple exercise, but how to switch off the stress response, not through positive thinking, but via the body. And then how to recognize what's happening in your defense system, because we all have patterns, involuntary patterns. And it's like we don't have the steering wheel in our hand. We don't know how to be with it, and we react and we cope and we minimize. But when you can understand what's happening in your brain and you've got the skills on what to do, and then you understand what's happening in the defense system within you, there's a clear path on how to get yourself out of that. So you're not going around in that stress coping defense pattern, but you're actually moving beyond it, because it really is simple. I'm not necessarily saying it's easy, because everybody's got their own journey, but it's actually very, very simple to get over the past. But as I said just before, people, the left brain, because we're really over focused on our left brain, label things. And I found over the years of working with people that people were labeling things very inaccurately a lot of the time, and not even recognizing, of course, that they're doing that. And so when you keep doing that, it keeps recreating certain beliefs and certain behaviors, and it just locks you in. And the brain goes to what it's done most recently and most frequently, and what's worked, because it's got us through. So unless we understand more about the stress response and brain, and I'm not talking technical, boring information, I'm talking fascinating information, because it's all about how you move through your day. And so it's fascinating and it's so energizing, because it's like you can do something about it. So whatever it is that you've experienced in your life, you just have to just keep doing certain things when you know how to work with your brain body system, and it's inevitable that past will close the door. It's just a matter of creating those neural pathways of what you're doing and being most frequently and most recently need to change from that old habit of how you identify yourself and how you learn how to be. And so they're just those well-worn grooves that your system keeps going to. And when you can get those new skills and you just keep repeating them, just keep doing that for a short period of time, and you'll see the path, the momentum starts to get stronger in that, and then you don't have to work at it anymore. In the beginning, it can feel hard because you're actually creating new neural pathways. And I remember when the advantage for me is that when I'm doing it, I can go, oh, this is feeling hard because I'm creating new neural pathways. It's going to get better. It's going to get easier. And there'll be a point when I don't even have to think about it. It'll be like when you first learnt to drive a car. You've got to think about everything. But now when you drive, you don't have to think about it at all. It's, yeah. So it's,
yeah, we just kind of get there and go, how did I get here?
Yeah, you don't even notice sometimes that you've gone through traffic lights and things, but your system knows what to do. Yeah, because you think you're so busy on other levels of things, but your system knows what to do. And there's been a momentum there. So your conscious mind doesn't have to do all of the hard work. And that can happen relatively quickly when you've got the right skills and the right support. So
you're really talking about a pattern interrupt. It's like you're on, autopilot, and you're looking at your life and you're going, why do I attract these horrible men, or these, I know you just work with women, but it could be, why do I attract these women that do this to me? Why does these things keep happening to me? It's because you're almost willing that into your life by the way that you're looking at your past and looking at what's happening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I use that phrase pattern interrupt all the time. And the important thing that needs to be done along with the pattern interrupt is you've got to be able to be doing and thinking things that soothe you and reassure you in a grounded way, in a realistic way, and that you aren't just surface level things that you're saying. Otherwise, your system doesn't believe it. And so you've got to be doing things where you get quick feedback back that reassures you that you're on track. And yeah,
So, how important is it to listen to your inner voice through this process?
it is really important. The thing is, sometimes people we all have lots of voices, nothing crazy about it. Yeah, we've all got different parts of ourselves and they all have different volume voices. Yeah. And it, when we say inner voice, it can depend on, is it our inner voice that's our inner guidance for the best for all of who we are? Or is it the inner voice that's learned to, I'll be the protector for you, and this is what you should be doing? It's like to be able to differentiate what voice is speaking to you and what's the intention behind it.
So is that like the analogy of, you know, the two wolves? So you've got one on your shoulder which is telling you, yeah, that's okay, you can go and do that, and you fall into another bad relationship, or it's the one that's going, you know, hang on, you've done this before, it didn't really work out well for you last time. Maybe you need to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also that voice can be confused for things like, you know, when I was growing up, I had to act as if my home environment was safe when it wasn't safe. And I had to act as if everything was, that these two important people in my life were lovable and loving to be around when they didn't feel that way to me. I had to show them, you know, as a child, being dependent, that I love you when I didn't feel love, when I felt uncomfortable. And so then we can have these mixes up in our brain where things light up and we label it as, oh, this is love, but it's actually been an imprint from an earlier time where we had to label it as love or label it as safe. So to be able to know, is it the good wolf or the bad wolf, we need to move out from my perspective of black and white thinking and really go into our body and get to know ourselves on a real level, because very often we're just going through the motions and we're repeating the same thoughts, the same actions, the same expectations, and we're not actually awake, having fresh new moments and creating new possibilities and getting excited by life. So we really need to get to know ourselves and be kind to ourselves, because we're so judgmental. We don't give ourselves a chance.
So true. Oh, gosh, Annette, are you listening? So you talk about, like, every woman has warning signs, and are these something that you can turn on, that so that you're more aware and more like tuned in to what's, you know, what works for you and what doesn't work for you?
The warning signs for me, like when I first started speaking professionally about abuse and toxic relationships and love, I started asking women, did you have early warning signs? It was a little bit of my research, I guess. And every single woman said yes, and including myself. But I think where people get caught up is they're looking for, what are the red flags out there? And so we get in a pattern where we're revolving around the other person, and I need to know you really well so I'll be okay, which is a bit of a repeat of what happens in childhood, where I need you to be okay because I'm dependent on you for me to be okay. And so I'm all for, forget about all the warning signs, because you just get connected to your body, and your body has more information than your conscious mind. Your conscious mind goes to shoulds and the past and the ifs and the buts and all the right and what if I'm wrong, but our body feels does this feel good or it doesn't feel good? And our body's connected to our unconscious. So the more we can tap into our body, our energy, our feelings, the unconscious, our inner guidance, the more we can trust what to do rather than what are the warning signs, because people can be very skilled and deceptive. So rather than trying to work out what should I trust, start to learn how to trust yourself, because then you can navigate anything in life. So you don't have to learn about what to trust about other people. It's about trusting yourself.
Why do we need to be taught this stuff? Because it's so important. Why is it not just instinctual for us to go, okay, my gut says that this is not going to work out well for me, so I'm going to walk away? When did we lose that connection?
I love your questions, Annette. It's so good. It's that real conversation where you're really present in the moment. And for me, from my perspective, why we need to be taught this, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, because when I started learning all this information and skills, I thought this is what we should be taught growing up. And I didn't see this modelled. It took me many years to accumulate all the different things that I understood were missing. And I created, I don't know if I've told you before, I created this term a number of years ago where I think it's not gender inequality that creates domestic violence. It's the feminine principle hemispherectomy. And I think that relates to everything that's not functional in the Western world. That, and what I mean by the feminine principle hemispherectomy is the left brain connects to logic, rationale, science, facts, math, sequence of things, conscious, rational, concrete, detail, black and white, all of those things. And that's what our society values so much of. But our society doesn't value the right brain principles, which are more the feminine principles, whereas the left brain is more the masculine principles. And we all need to have access to both. And so the right brain connects to the unconscious, images, feelings, the body, the unknown, the mysterious, the abstract, the big picture of what's going on. And so when that's ridiculed and devalued and the left brain principles are hyper valued, then we lose connection to our body, to nature, to our inner being, to our spirituality, to our creative life potential. And that to me is why, as a world, there's so many people struggling right now, because we're so much more than our rational brain. And if everyone said, oh, look, let's just do a lobotomy and get rid of your right brain, we don't need it, it's not very effective, no one would want to, yeah? And actually the left brain comes up with, and this is why the mislabeling happens, because when we don't tap in and value our right brain, the left brain makes interpretations and it doesn't have the right brain information. So the interpretations are inaccurate, and that's what's happening. So that's my theory as to why we don't learn this, is because we've got such an overvaluing of the left brain function.
It's almost like, you've been to the gym and you've just spent your whole time going like that, and you've got these big arms that side, and then like you can barely pick up your cup the other side. And I would think it almost seems like this should be the first class that we take when we enter the school system. It's like how to go across the two different hemispheres of your brain to be a well-rounded, like happy human being.
Absolutely. Imagine what it would be like if everybody was taught how to use their body to get their brain and their energy in flow, and we would be able to, the Empower program, I write it with a small EM and then power as big. And the reason I do that is I want to differentiate between EM. For me, represents emotional muscle, and when we don't have access to our power within, we don't have the emotional muscle to step out of the repeat pattern that we all keep doing, and we need that. And so then if we were taught that at school, instead of school shapes us to fit in with the teacher because they've got a, it was all, to do with industrialization where, look after the children so that the adults could go to work, instead of what happened in more farming communities and everything where the kids were just all around. And so there's been this, we get shaped, through the history and through our childhood to sit in and be quiet and don't cause a fuss. And, all those behavioural, emotional things contribute to us not being able to tap into our whole brain and our whole self.
So how do we help empower women to be more comfortable to follow their inner guidance and, their body, instead of using, like, I get we still have to use logic, but to trust that a little bit more? Because I often hear women say, oh, I knew I shouldn't have gone out with him because my gut said it, and yet we still go and do it anyway.
Yeah. And it's so much fun when you experiment with trusting yourself and listen to the gut. And what I always say is that if you listen to it when it's subtle and small, then trust that it's as important as if it was concrete and big in front of you, because the only difference between those two is time. If you keep doing what you're doing, if you sense this isn't the right person, but it's a sense you're not seeing something concrete, and you still say keep dating them, and then you get something concrete will happen. It will grow through time. It's only through time. But it's like, why not skip that time thing, and when you sense it, trust it, because it's so powerful. And how do we get that more in our society? Well, women like you are already modeling it. And for me, it's about, we need to model it. And this is why I speak up about certain things, and why I have conversations with certain people to model speaking about the uncomfortable or being myself. Sometimes, a lot of the time I'm not wearing makeup and I'm still doing my business lives, and might be looking a bit scruffy or something. And it's like, and just being able to be ourselves, whoever we're being around, and being able to place more priority on how you feel, because that's what everything comes down to. Why we do everything in life in the end is because we want to feel good. And so if we can start prioritizing feeling good now, then everything else will fall into place. But getting in groups of women, and this is why I love running women's groups, helps, because it helps to have other women. And back in the day, there was the red tents, where women would support each other and have women's business kind of going on. And so when we get in those groups, then we can encourage and support each other to step out of our habit and follow our heart, follow our inner guidance, so that we can live the life we're truly meant to be living.
So you talk a lot about our undiscovered feminine qualities and powers. What are those, and like, where can I go find them?
Well, very often we have so many limiting beliefs about ourselves that get in the way of trusting our inner guidance, because our inner guidance can tap into so much. I don't know if I've shared this story with you before, Annette, but when one of my daughters was pregnant, she was overdue, and so she rang me up and said, "Mum, can you come over and help me? So, I want this baby out." So I went, and we worked with the body and the unconscious, and it didn't take that long, and we shifted it. And she goes, "I feel good now. I feel ready. You can go home, Mum." And I thought, well, it's not going to be that long now, so should I go home? And she said, "Yeah, go home. I'll ring you then." So she lived at that stage about an hour from me. And I was driving home. About halfway home, I felt labour pains. Now, I wasn't pregnant, but because when you're clear of those limiting beliefs, you pick up things more. We're so connected to each other. We don't have to be in the same room to have that connection. And so I stopped and I rang her and I said, "It started, hasn't it?" And she said, "Yes." So it's like we can know so much if we stop making our literal left brain the God. And it's irrelevant whether you're female or male, because what I'm talking about is for any living being, any person. We've all got the understanding that I have is that for each of us, whether the masculine principle, whether you're a man or a woman, the masculine principle is meant to be there to support the feminine in us. And so the masculine supports, protects, and takes it out into the world, but that we're meant to be coming from our feminine principle, from our heart, from our connection to the unconscious or our inner guidance or our instinct, that we're all the same.
Like I suppose we get kind of bogged down in men versus women and women versus men and masculine versus feminine, where what you're saying is that we actually need both. It's the yin and yang of being a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that blew me away when I was studying at university was in one of the sociology classes when the teacher talked about that the differences between men and women are as big and as little as the differences between men and women and women.
Oh,
So,
I love that.
I know, isn't it good? And so we're all the same, and we all need to think about our feelings and feel about our thinking and honour all of who we are. And and then there's more freedom to be who we are rather than these roles that are just so limiting. We're so much more than that.
We're almost finished, but I'd really love to wrap up on the topic of self-love. It's something that, we hear a lot about now, like there's T-shirts and, groups. And why is it something that we find so difficult to do? Like we love TV shows, we love chocolate, we love books, we love the rain, we love the beach. But why do we have so much trouble loving ourselves?
Yeah, it's such a popular thing now, this self-love, isn't it? And it's like we're all so connected, because around that time when it started coming all on social media was when I started my women's group platform of activating self-love. And it was like suddenly seeing this love everywhere. And I think the thing is, we know the actions to do with it, but we haven't often experienced the modeling of how to be with love when everything's not perfect. So we can love the chocolate, or we can love the sunset, or a ripped body or something, because it's all perfect. But how are we shown how to love the human fullness of how we are? And when we don't have the experience of that, it's hard to take that in and give that to us. Because when we're growing up as children, we get a lot from the experience of how our parents look at us, speak to us, think about us, feel about us, and we internalize that, because in those first few years, we're in a hypnagogic state, the way our brain waves are. And so there isn't a filter between the conscious and the unconscious, and there's not a filter between what's yours and what's mine. So we have this big muddle of things that are going on. But for me, one of the things that's really come strong over the last while of working with people is that when we have particular skills of how to, which is to me an act of self-love, when we know how to talk to ourselves, if you just learn how to do that skill in the optimal way, then life's going to be a breeze.
Okay.
Do anything. That's one of the tools.
So that means stop saying that you're stupid, you're dumb, you're ugly, you're silly, and all of those horrible things that we say to ourselves. If we can just look at ourselves and go, you know what? You're a pretty cool person, and I like you.
Yeah. Absolutely. But again, those simple things aren't necessarily easy. And that's why I teach a specific tool so that you develop the language of it, because it's something that I model when I'm working with women all the time. So because I'm wanting to speak it for them so that they can hear what it sounds like, because they haven't heard it before. And so then it's like they always say to me, oh, I wish you'd recorded that, or have you recorded that, or can you say it again and record it? And I do, I send them recordings of it, and we go over this technique again and again because it gets easier. But it's just a matter of practice, and then it gets easier. But very often, if we all say to ourselves, I'll think better for myself, we're blank. We actually don't know what words to use. We can't even find the words. And so it's really helpful to have someone model it and go over it and unpack it with you, so that you can actually, if that's the only thing you practice every day, gradually those neural pathways would get easier and easier and more well-worn, that you wouldn't have to think about it. It would just be there, the way the limiting thoughts are. And that works. I know, because I practiced everything on me first. And
you're your guinea pig.
Absolutely. And it's the best tool. It is magical. You don't have to learn a whole lot of things, even though the brain does like variety. But yeah, that I do webinars on that tool, and I just call it the one tool. It's like, if you just have that, you can overcome any stress.
Oh, Anita Bentata from Activating Anitas. I love all that you do, and I'm so glad that you've taken your experiences and that you're using them for good and to change the lives of other people. I will share Anita's link to her website. So if you want to check out those webinars and the tools that she's talked about, go right ahead. Anita, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge tonight.
Thank you. Can I just say, if people hear this in this next coming week, that I've got government funding from the Victorian Multicultural Commission, so you can work with me online for 16 weeks. And for women with no or low income, it's completely free. For women who work full time, it's heavily subsidised. You'll get recordings of all the sessions. You'll get handouts. You'll get my daily support. It's a beautiful opportunity. If you want to work with me, email me so I can send you an information pack, because I am on a mission I'm obsessed with helping as many women as possible for their life to get easy and fun.
Oh, beautiful. Can you send me the link for that so I can pop it in the chat box? And you heard it from Anita. What a great opportunity to change the way that you think and to create a different life.
Thanks so much, Nanette. It's great.
Thank you, Anita.
Okay.